Here's one from a special guest, actually, Edwin Bryant, who says, you seem to be heading in a direction of certain non-dual systems in India. Is the phenomenal mentalism self-aware? And he goes on to say that I'm not sure that question can be answered, can it? But we are self-aware. So what is this dissociative boundary that separates us? Is it too mental? Is it also mental? And what prevents an ontology of absolute mental monism with no forms or qualities? And what are the individuators or boundaries in your model? So a few things actually here, if you could please address this.
So is the dissociative boundary mental? Of course. You can think of the dissociative boundary as inferential isolation. So in graph theory, you can think of the dissociative boundary as what defines a segment of your graph that is not connected to anything beyond itself. It is internally connected, but not connected to anything around it. That's how you can think of dissociation. In other words, dissociation is not an extra, it is the absence of cognitive associations. And when that absence is coherent enough that it isolates, inferentially isolates internal mental activity from mental activity surrounding it, then we talk of a boundary. But the boundary is not a thing, it's the absence of cognitive associations. And therefore, it's of course mental, because all there is are cognitive associations. Is analytic idealism consistent with Eastern non-dualism? I've come to conclude that it is. I didn't come to it from meditation. I'm spiritually, I'm terrible. I don't have a good mind for that stuff. I only have transcendent experiences with high dose psychedelics, which are legal in my country. So I experimented with that. But I come at it from pure reasoning and empirical evidence, but I feel reassured that it dovetails so well with people who arrive at the same conclusions through introspection. Because if all there is one mind of nature, it stands to reason that introspection too is a valid path to knowledge about the whole and all, because there is only one mind in nature beyond the dissociation. Now, what I don't understand is talk of a monistic mental ontology without qualities. Because qualities are mental, and mentation without qualities is only the potential for qualities. It's the field when it's not excited. It's like speaking of the quantum field when it's not excited at all, when there is no quantum foam. Well, we know that in nature, it doesn't work like that. Quantum fields are always self-exciting. There is always a quantum foam. They are never at rest. I think mind is the same thing, because I think mind is the quantum fields. It's never completely at rest. It's always self-exciting. So there is no ontology of pure mentation without qualities. You would need to have only the potential for qualities and not the qualities themselves. You know, you're not talking then about anything that is measurable. Now, self-awareness is mind inherently aware of itself. It depends on what we mean by the word, but by the expression self-awareness. I have a friend, Rupert Spira, who is a spiritual teacher, and he talks about consciousness being inherently knowing itself. It's in the very nature of consciousness to know itself. What he means by that is that consciousness knows itself by direct acquaintance. By being itself, since it's consciousness, there is a sense in which whatever it's conscious of, it is itself, because it's the only thing that there is. But there is another technical sense for the expression self-awareness, which entails what psychologists call re-representation. And that's something else. That's metacognition. That's when you take a step away from your own mental consciousness and you re-represent your own mental activity to yourself in order to evaluate or inspect the contents of your own mind. Now, the latter is a high-level mental function. The latter is conscious metacognition. I don't think it's inherent to mind. I think it's something that has evolved over 4 billion years on planet Earth at the cost of a lot of blood and suffering. It was not there from the beginning. I don't think nature is self-reflective or metacognitive, or it has premeditated this whole thing. I think nature is spontaneous. I'm a naturalist, and therefore self-awareness, technically speaking, entailing re-representation or metacognition, I don't think it's inherent at all. We evolved that at great cost over the millennia.
Yeah, I just like to maybe bring out two very quick questions. Okay, there are plenty of questions which we might get into later after the colloquium, but I particularly like these two ones. The first one is, how would you classify artificial intelligence? Would it ever have mental states? And the second question is, what experiments would you suggest to demonstrate mind as a quantum field?
Okay, the first question first. Everything is mental states. So a computer is also made of mental states, transpersonal mental states, which appear to us as silicon chips and copper and wires and chips and all that. But when we ask about sentient AI, conscious AI, we are not asking just whether it's made of mental states. We are asking something more. What we are asking is, does it have private conscious inner life, analogously to how I have private conscious inner life bound by the boundaries of my body? Can an AI also have private conscious inner life of its own, bound by the boundaries of the computer? And my answer to that is no, we have absolutely no reason to think that, because what you're asking is an intelligent computer also what an alter of universal consciousness looks like? That's what you're asking. When you ask, does it have private conscious inner life of its own? What you're asking is this also the appearance of a dissociative process in the mind of nature? And I think we have no reason to think that any more than we have reason to think that a thermostat or an abacus has private conscious inner life of its own. Computer engineers know what is happening in that black box of a CPU or a GPU. Computer scientists may not know, and therefore they think that some kind of magic happens there, and therefore it might as well be conscious. But there are people on this planet who have built that stuff, and we know exactly what's going on there. And I can assure you that doesn't matter how modern the GPU or the CPU, whatever it is doing can in principle be done with PVC pipes, water, and pressure valves. You can build the most advanced CPU in the universe with PVC pipes, water, and pressure valves. It would be the size of a planet, maybe a star, but it is in principle possible. Now, a system of PVC pipes, water, and pressure valves is known to you. That's your house's sanitation system. It's your home sanitation system. Do you think it has a private conscious inner life of its own? If you don't, then you have to ask yourself, will my opinion change if I keep adding more pipes and more pressure valves and more liters of water to it? Of course not. Adding more of the same stuff doesn't lead to the magical step from not being a dissociative segment of the mind of nature to being a dissociative segment with a mental inner life of its own. I think we will be able to create artificially beings with private conscious inner life, but they will not look like computers. They will look like biology. I think sentient AI, the challenge to do that is the same challenge as abiogenesis, the creation of life from non-life. Because nature is telling us that what dissociation looks like is metabolism, it's biology, not silicon substrates and dielectrics and metals. That's not what it looks like. It's arbitrary to think that that too would be what a dissociated outer looks like. So I think sentient AI is just nonsense. It's something peddled by people who do not understand computers. They are power users of computers, but they do not understand computers.
We're running out of time, but the other seemingly small question was, what experiments would you suggest to demonstrate mind as a quantum field? So making this a testable hypothesis, of course, it sounds like a very exciting hypothesis, but can we really test it out as the real question and develop a mathematics and theory for it?
But there are a great number of things that that you could imagine as a good test for this hypothesis. And by the way, they have been tested. Um, you see, idealism is a notion that the only type of state that there is in nature is mental states. Now, mental states are the only given of nature. They are pre-theoretical. We have mental states before we start theorizing about mental states or non-mental states. It's what we have when we start thinking. It's mental states. So mental states absolutely exist. And you can have debate about whether they are reducible or not, whether you need something that is non-mental or not, whether it makes sense to talk of the non-mental. But mental states exist. They are pre-theoretical. They are the sole given of nature. Now, what we then have to test is, do we need more than mental states to make sense of nature? I would argue no. All we need is external mental states to account for the world we inhabit. We don't need to make them non-mental. So the burden of proof rests with those who postulate the extra ontological type called non-mental purely quantitative states. If you don't need that, then it's like the flying spaghetti monster. I cannot refute the hypothesis, but we don't need the hypothesis. Now, if you open that gate, then all kinds of not disprovable, nonsensical stuff will get people asking you, well, what experiment can you propose to disprove the flying spaghetti monster? Well, I can't disprove it. But my question is, do we need that? No, we don't. In exactly the same way, we don't need non-mental states. We only need external mental states, the internal and the external being defined by a mental process we know to exist, and that is dissociation. We know empirically it exists. Now, what are these experiments then? What can they show us? Well, let's look at the alternative hypothesis. Under physicalism, the real states of nature are non-mental, and therefore non-mental stuff should have standalone reality. And therefore measurement should only disclose their properties, not create their properties. Can we come up with experiments that check this? Yes. And we have been running those experiments for 45 years, and they have won the Nobel Prize last year. And the result is no, non-mental states or physical states do not have standalone existence unless you entertain science fiction for which we have absolutely no empirical evidence. Short of that, no, physical states do not have standalone reality. That's 45 years of experimentation for you. Another experiment you can devise. If physical brain states are the cause of mental states, then there can be nothing to mental states that can't be traced back to physical states. If physical states cause mental states, then everything about mental states has to be traceable back to physical states. Yeah? Now, if physical states instead are what mental states look like when observed from across a dissociative boundary, now you don't have that constraint anymore, because the appearance of a phenomenon does not need to convey all there is to know about the phenomenon. I'm seeing your face right now. That's your appearance represented on my computer screen. But I can't see your lungs. I can't see your back. I can't see your blood flow. Your appearance correlates with your mental inner life. If you get very sad, I will see you crying. But the appearance doesn't convey everything there is to know about the thing it's an appearance of. So if under certain non-ordinary circumstances, there are things about felt experience that cannot be traced back to patterns of brain activity, then you have your answer. Brain activity is now the image of experience, and therefore it doesn't need to be complete. But if brain activity is the cause, then there can be nothing to experience that you can't find back in patterns of brain activity. The results are out. Psychedelic research, neuroimaging of trance states, studies of brain damage, acquired savant syndrome. All these things show us that there are a great many number of non-ordinary circumstances in which that appearance is indeed incomplete. You cannot find stuff about our mental inner life back in patterns of brain activity. And that shows you that the correlation between the two is the correlation between the thing in itself and an appearance, as opposed to a cause and an effect. Those experiments have been done as well.
Thank you again, Bernardo.